welcome to Lyons Den. Last show I had two storytellers from Moose, the Moose organization, and this week I have two more who are going to tell you some wonderful stories. Robert Skoglund is the humble farmer. He is from St. George, Maine. He worked for NPR for many years doing a jazz program. No.
Didn't work.
Volunteer. You were a volunteer producer. But
28 years I volunteered.
28 years, old jazz and dry humor. You volunteered there.
I volunteered for 28 years.
So
I
you
was
had
asked to do a show, yes.
So all I want to know is, where'd you get that music?
My friends sent
There.
it to me.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a fella like John out on the boat. John's rich. John's out on a boat off the coast of Maine. He listens to Humble. He realizes that Humble doesn't have much music, so he'll make 6 CDs of Django and he'll send them to Humble. Louise down in the, what do you call it? Southern Jersey. It's not the boonies. What do they call it?
Oh, Pine Barrens?
Pine Barrens.
Down in the, what do you call it?
Pine Barrens.
Barrens.
South
No, there's
Jersey.
another word they call it. There's a slang name. Anyway, she's down southern Bloomfield.
Bloomfield's not southern.
Well, way down southern New Jersey.
Oh, Cape May?
Cape May.
Pineys, the Pineys.
Pineys. of
Pineys.
course. Yeah, she's a Piney.
Louise down in the Pineys has sent me all kinds of good things, and I play that. And then there was a lawyer down in the southern part of the state who sent me a nice
All from New
selection.
Jersey?
What?
People from New Jersey
The
sent
southern
you?
part of Maine, a lawyer from down the southern part of Maine who sent me some stuff.
So they had the originals, and they made CDs for
Yeah,
you?
or else Carl Jefferson called up one day. Carl Jefferson owned a company called Concord Jazz. And Carl said, "Farmer, you are going to learn to play CDs on your program." This was back when, before CDs, we had records and we would spin the thing. We would hold the turntable and we put it on huge tapes about this big, 2 tapes we had in the studio there. You were going to learn to burn CDs. So Carl Jefferson owned a company called Concord Jazz out in California, Concord, California. He sent me this big box of CDs, and they came to me. And Charles Beck, the program manager, says you cannot have these CDs. As a person who's making the program, you're not allowed to have these CDs that are sent to you by companies. So I sent them all back to Carl Jefferson. And Carl Jefferson sent them to Scott Hamilton's father in Port Clyde, who loaned them to me. So I got this big box of CDs. Scott Hamilton, by the way, is a internationally famous saxophone player, and he lives down the road from me.
Oh.
And so he was on many of these CDs with Concord Jazz. So that's where I got all those CDs, and I played them over and over and over and over. And nowadays, of course, you can go online and on YouTube.
Here,
I'm
I'm
watching your eyes. On YouTube, you can get most anything now. So you just copy it onto your machine, take it off YouTube, and recycle it.
But so you grew up in
St. George, Maine.
George. You've always lived there.
Always lived there, except I went away to school. I have a most embarrassing education. I'm educated far beyond my ability to learn.
Okay.
And it's difficult being an extremely well-educated man. Well, I've lived in Europe, and it's difficult living in a rural neighborhood because you don't have you don't see the world the same way as your neighbors do, who are more, whatever the word is, provincial or something. And it's hard.
But you like living there.
Oh, I couldn't live anywhere else. I couldn't live anywhere. I'm putting my farm in conservation. I have about 75 acres, goes down to the ocean, and it is going into conservation, so there can never be another house built on this land. There are too many houses. There are towns in Connecticut, I understand, that buy huge tracts of land just to keep people out, because it's cheaper to buy the land than it is to pay for all the services for all the people who will live there. You get people moving in, you have to build more schools, more police, more psychologists. You need another television station. Wow, it's expensive to build these things. So, no more houses on my land. I'm very happy there. I raise rhubarb. I sell organic rhubarb in the summer. We talked about it with with about 40% of the studio audience. I talked about raising rhubarb.
Well, that sounds like that's a major cash crop. Is you the rhubarb king of Maine?
Yes, I believe I am. I believe I am. Like my friend sitting there, he says, I remember when you used to write personals for the Maine Times. Antique dealer seeks attractive young woman interested in one nightstand. He remembered that from 40 years. Remember that from 40 years. Yeah? And what you said, the king of the rhubarb, made me think of that because I was mentioned to him about John Cole did a feature on me 40 years ago. King of the Maine Times Personals. That was my first claim to fame.
What were some of the ones you wrote? Do you remember?
I can't say them on the air. I wouldn't. I mean, they can. It's nothing compared to what they say now, but I'm very old, very conservative with my speech. Let me see. Experienced traveler seeks attractive young woman who really enjoys being abroad.
That's clean.
To the pretty girl in Brunswick with the '74 Ford with the rusted front fenders. Because that could be most any girl in Brunswick.
Well, back then it could be, not now.
Your soft kiss held me breathless as your light fingers worked their wondrous magic.
Ooh.
I'd like my wallet back. And every week I would have one of these things in the Maine Times. Personal. I paid for all these things. And it made me famous among that great subculture in Maine of hippies with a master's degree. They could understand multisyllabic English, and they appreciated what I was doing. They plays on words. And one day, my next-door neighbor, Hamina Lazansky, came over and said, Maine Public Radio is playing a communist folk singer from El Salvador. He's singing in Spanish, kill the landlords and throw their bodies on the field. Their blood will make good fertilizer. So I called up Maine Public Radio, and with great feigned indignation, I said, why are you playing a communist folk singer on Maine Public Radio who is singing in Spanish, kill the landlords? I have Spanish-speaking tenants in my house next door who are listening to this. And they said, blah, blah. You know how anybody always points the finger at somebody else. Oh, it comes on microfiche from Boston. We ain't got nothing to do with that. You want to do a jazz show? And I said, how do you know that I know about jazz? They said, you sent in $5 one time to hear Harry Carney. So I went up and did a pilot, and I was scared, and Janice Gray did the knobs. And I read the script the same way I do my television program now. I read it, and I read the script, and my hands were shaking, and I was nervous. And I was right there for 28 years, and I don't think the management even knew I was there. I didn't hear from for a long time. Until one day I read a definition. I made the habit of every morning, before I go in the bathroom, I'd pull an Encyclopedia Britannica off the shelf at random, just pull one out, and I'd take it in the bathroom, and I'd sit there, and I would open it at random, and I would read. And one day I read about how Mussolini came to power, and I just like passing something along, educational things, Bates, Colby, Bowdoin stations, there's educational station. People like to know, how did Mussolini come to power? So I read a definition of fascism in Italy from the Encyclopedia Britannica. I copied it. They went right through the roof. You cannot say things like that on public radio. You cannot read.
But that's history.
Huh?
That's history.
Well, it was from the Encyclopedia Britannica. But there were people that read the definition, how you could define fascism, and they didn't like people being able to know how you can define fascism. They didn't want people to know, if you see this and this and this and this, it is fascism. So, wow, I got a letter of reprimand, and about 6 months later, a 12-page document, fine print, 12 pages, was written, and I was asked to sign this, and I could not sign it, of course. And there's a word for this. When you want to get rid of someone who is in a company, what you do is you will write a set of guidelines that applies to that person. and everybody can sign it except that one person. If I'd signed it, I would have been unable to run my program in New Mexico and Miami Public Radio, which is where it was going at the time. And I was getting paid for that. So a financial thing. And my friends were quite upset. I understand it cost public radio about $250,000 in lost funding because thousands of people stopped sending money, and I still hear about it all the time. They talk to me about it. And one of them said, "Humble, you are going to do television." And they bought me a nice camera, and Donna Frizzoli sat down with me and showed me how to push the buttons, and I make a television program. And when I do, I have a little script. I used to do it with a teleprompter years ago. It was a big piece of wood with a stick coming out of it, with a paint roller on it, with a roll of paper towels on the paint roller, with 20 pages of this scotch taped together, wrapped around it. And I had a friend there who would stand there, like you, Bill, and you would stand there and you would turn it, roll it around the paint roller for me, and I'd read it.
Teleprompter?
And I'd say, I'd read a thing like this. One of my radio friends was having supper with us, and while we were eating, Marcia, my wife, the almost perfect woman, who always knows everything about everybody long before I do, Marcia said, if I had seen him sitting in the cockpit, I'd say, how can this little boy be flying this plane? I looked at my young guest and I said, you fly an airplane that carries 300 people to Europe? And he says, well, actually, my mother drives me to the airport. Don't be afraid. This kind of audience you have, they sit there like this. And it's even worse when you do a live show on stage and people want to laugh. And they sit there and go like this.
Busted gut.
You can articulate your sentiments.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
For
when are we going to
Bill
eat?
Or Bill or Humble?
I have fun doing what I do. How about you, Bill?
Yeah, I enjoy it. And
he's good, ain't he?
This is great.
A
Here,
big hand.
We have
a hand for this
major
man,
audience.
please.
For the audience, you see, when you perform, you're like that proverbial tree in the forest. And if the tree falls and there's nobody there, is there any sound made? Well, if you perform, there's nobody there. Did you perform at all? So I thank you for coming.
I always thank him for staying.
Yeah, for staying too. But,
well, I want to thank both of you very, very much. And the audience, thank you for coming. And I'm Maureen Lyons. This is Lyons Den. And next time I'll have 2 more storytellers. And please support your local storyteller. Thanks. Oh my God, let me help.